I felt it too.
How many people does it take to figure out how to get 2 people in a live stream?
2 is the answer.
Well, welcome everybody. This was supposed to be Dylan's live Q&A, but I had to figure it out for him. So ipso facto, it's my live Q&A.
Yeah.
I need to take these classes.
Lesson learned.
All right. Well, Dylan, what are we doing here? I feel like this is your show, so you got to take it away. And I hope you are bringing the thunder because it is noon. I should be eating lunch, but we're going to answer coaching Q&A. So drum roll, take it away.
That's what we're doing, is answering questions about coaching. If you've ever wondered, what can coaching do for me? What can Macros Inc. do for me? If you have questions, people always ask me when I say, hey, have you considered coaching? They're always like, what does coaching include? And the problem with that answer is it's so in-depth that it's very hard to summarize it all in one message. It's kind of one of those things like you have to like come and see what, like, join us, and then you can see firsthand what it's all about. Because like I said, it's very difficult to explain. You gotta do it for yourself.
So let's do this. How about you pretend you're a sales guy and I'm a client, a potential client, and I'm going to ask you all the questions / objections people might give you, and you got to bat them down.
Let's do it.
Why the heck do I have to sign up for 3 months? Like, isn't 30 days enough for me to completely change everything about my life?
Well, that is a great question. There are several reasons, but first and foremost, habits take time. So the 3 months, and sometimes 3 months isn't even enough for people. Sometimes it is, but 3 months is a pretty good minimum to really dive into your habits and revise some things and really instill new behaviors that are then going to set you up for life. Because I could give you a 1 month crash diet and you could lose weight on it, but when you're done, what are you going to do after that? How are you going to sustain that? So if you invest 3 months with a coach, the idea there is that during that time you'll have that ability to then handle it on your own after that. So it's really for the sake of your long-term benefit.
But what if I don't want to sign up for 3 months? What if I'm just not comfortable with that?
Well, what makes you uncomfortable?
I'm afraid that I will sign up and realize it's not right for me, and then I'm stuck for 3 months.
When you say it's not right for you, what do you mean? Like, what would be not right for you?
That it won't work for me.
Okay, and in what sense? How would you foresee it not working for you?
Dylan, I'm asking the questions here.
No, I'm asking you because you wanted me to be the sales guy and you're the client. I have to get to the bottom of it.
I'm afraid that I'll realize it's hard and then I won't do the work.
Okay.
So now we're at the real reason why people are a little bit afraid of 3 months, right?
Exactly, for sure.
I mean, in reality, how long is 3 months?
Yeah, it's 90 days. What's that phrase too? I mean, how many days to break a bad habit? I can't remember what it is, which is not necessarily true, by the way. But 3 months goes by in a flash, though, if you think about it. We're at the end of 2020. Doesn't it just seem like 2020 just started? To me, it does.
2020 feels like it just started, but also has been the longest year of forever.
I mean, for me, it doesn't feel that way. Like, it feels like, I mean, I can remember yesterday when the pandemic was, when all this went down, right? And like now we're 4 days away from Christmas. So I don't know. I feel like it's maybe the best way to put it is it's been a short, long year because there's been a lot of stuff that has gone on, but look where we're at already.
I think that's maybe it, is like the year feels like it's gone by really fast, but so much has happened. It's been like, what?
Like I'm ready for it to be over. And I think that's what people are fatigued from.
Okay, so we've dealt with the 3 month thing. My next question would be, well, I've tried counting macros before and it didn't work. What's different now?
Well, with coaching, you're not just going to get someone who helps you track macros. Yeah, that's part of it. That's part of what we do. We want to make sure that you're tracking accurately. But the problem is not usually that people don't know how to track macros. With a little bit of practice, you're just adding numbers up. It's pretty easy, right? I could teach an elementary kid how to add macros. That's not really the hard part. The hard part is What do you do when the weekend's here? What are your behaviors then? What are your behaviors at night? Because a lot of people do well during the day or during the week. Then the weekend gets here or the night gets here and all hell breaks loose, right? So it's getting to the bottom of what's beyond, because again, the macros are easy, but what's stopping you from being able to track those macros? It's your habits. And that's what we have to dive into and work with you.
Okay. What's the best way to put this question? So one of the things that I struggle with a lot is I don't know what to eat. Do your coaches provide meal plans? Like I want to come in day one and I want you to tell me everything I need to eat so I'll just lose weight. Can your coaches do that for me?
We don't provide meal plans. There are some good reasons for that. The first main reason, it kind of ties back to why we require 3 months, which is that if I give you a meal plan, it doesn't teach you much about the relationship between food and your body, right? It doesn't tell you how much food you actually need. It also doesn't teach you how to prep for yourself. So the approach that we take is I'll set some macros for you. I can make suggestions on certain foods to help you hit your targets. In the first few weeks, you will probably have a tough time, and that's natural. But we'll help you through that. It'll get easier so that when you're done, you know how to cook. You can look at a piece of chicken, let's say, and say that's about 6 ounces, or that's about 250 grams or whatever. That's kind of what I need. So by you tracking your macros and not having a meal plan, and by you having to make things and prep things yourself, you're simultaneously getting a visual idea of what appropriate portion sizes look like for you. And that's the real value in it. It's that old adage, if I teach a man to fish, he's going to be able to feed himself for life. If I give him
the lake is out of fish.
Or until the lake's out of fish, right. So
but if I just have like no idea where to start, can your coaches at least like, hey, maybe give me some ideas of what a day might look like?
Yes, absolutely. Okay. And yeah, absolutely. And we have you could start small. You could okay, well, if you're not into cooking because it's not your thing right now, there are plenty of meals that are ready to go and you just need to microwave it. There are actually a lot of solutions for that would fit into your macros that don't require more than 2 to 3 minutes for you to prep. So you don't have to be some cook genius to follow this, but we could absolutely help small steps in the beginning.
What if I'm a vegetarian?
What if you're a vegetarian?
Can you help me?
Of course, absolutely. We have vegetarians, we have vegans. Well, because counting your macros is just an accounting system. It doesn't limit you to any specific food. So if you are a vegan and that's your preferred diet, or if you're vegetarian, we'll help you find vegan or vegetarian food sources that will help you hit your targets there as well. So what you want to eat is that's the preferential part, but we'll help you hit your targets. So vegan or not, you're good.
Do you have any coaches who are vegan and can understand my lifestyle?
We do, actually. We do have one of our
good.
coaches. Yeah. She's a fantastic coach. So if you're looking to work with someone who also follows that lifestyle, we would be able to accommodate that.
What other questions do I have for you? Ooh, what does the 2-week trial include? Do you guys not tell me all the secrets, or do you tell me all the secrets up front, or what's the deal? Are you guys just trying to do the old bait and switch where you have a free trial, but nobody actually helps me until the 2-week trial's up and then I get information, or what's up?
Yeah, you get a pamphlet of pretty locations in beach paradise. We'll send you a calendar in those first few weeks that you can hang up on your fridge. Then after the 2 weeks, that's when the coaching starts. So no, of course I'm kidding about all that. So yes, the 2-week trial, what you actually get is, first of all, it's kind of an introductory phase to allow you to, you got to fill out paperwork, right? You got to get familiar with our client portal. We need to assign you to a coach. Those things take time because we don't just randomly assign you. We want to review your intake forms, and then we'll pair you up with someone from there. But the 2-week trial will allow you to meet with your coach. You get a consultation call so you can actually talk to people about your goals, ask and answer questions about how you want your coaching to go and what you should expect. And then the rest of the time after you've met with your coach is getting familiar with the client portal, getting familiar with your coach, the coaching process itself, and to get some practice in and hopefully get one of your check-ins in so you can see how the weekly check-in report's going to go. So there's no secrets. There's definitely no secrets. It's really just to kind of get the ball rolling and get you acquainted with what to expect for the subsequent months.
But you do get like a full consult, right? Like,
yeah,
I don't have to wait to talk to my coach. Like,
yeah, I mean, once we pair you up with someone, the coach has 24 hours to reach out to you to schedule that call. You'll schedule that call with them. It's typically a video call like this, and then the calls can range anywhere from 60 to 90 minutes. So it's a full, as long as it needs to be with you and your coach.
How do you pair me up with a coach?
Well, we'll review your intake forms. Actually, Jay is the one that currently hand pairs people with a coach. He does it for everybody. He reviews the intake forms. He has certain criteria that he goes off of, but ideally the idea there is to fit you up with someone that is going to be a good fit based on what you've written in there. So that's all done by hand.
Okay. And what if Jay dies? How do we pair coaches?
Well, we know the secret formula for the criteria, so you and I can just pick that up where he left off. Hopefully he doesn't die. Don't die, Jay.
That would be very sad. Then
we still need him.
What happens if, like, let's say I sign up and I like don't get along with my coach super well? Like, what if it's just a bad personality fit, and then am I just like stuck and kind of out the 3-month contract, or like how does that work?
Well, it's like any relationship, whether it's a friendship, business relationship, whatever. The first step usually to try to mediate that relationship is communicate with your coach, right? So, if there's a problem there, we would try to help you solve that with your coach by either maybe we hop on a call again and you talk about what your needs and expectations are, and the coach can do the same. If that's not working and you're like, this, we've tried that, it still isn't working, I need someone else, we can get you a new coach. You're not stuck with just one person. We would obviously like to see that, whatever friction is there or whatever you don't feel comfortable about with your coach, we'd like to see that get mediated if possible. But again, if it can't happen, then we can get you another coach.
So I guess, what other questions do most people have, like when they're thinking about signing up for coaching or when they first get started?
Yeah, I mean, it's you pretty much nailed them all. I mean, those are the big ones. But the underlying theme of all of them, when you really dig down and just you take all your questions, for example, and you peel away the layers, at the foundation of those questions is fear and uncertainty, right? Because people are like, well, yeah, what if I fail? That's probably the most common concern. And to that, I always try to address that by saying, actually, this is going to sound weird, but I want you to fail. We want you to fail, because if you don't, I mean, when you fail at something, a coach can look at that and be like, cool, that's perfect. Here's what you did wrong. Here's what to do next time. And each time you chip away at those things that you failed at, you get better. That's getting better. Getting better is just failing less, right? So if you fail, that opens up an opportunity for us to look at it and correct it with you. That's how you improve. So failure is the default. Failure is actually a good thing. So that's at the core of most questions. And so I try to address it by just, it's natural to feel that way, but you've got a coach in your corner that'll help you out. And that's what we do. We try to make it easier for you.
Do people actually need a coach, or can they do it themselves without any help?
Well, that's a very subjective question. I don't know that I could give an objective answer on that, because some people do need a coach. Like, I have had people that could not do this on their own, and then I helped them out and they saw tremendous progress. Then I've had other people that I know personally that I didn't coach. They didn't use a coach to my knowledge, and they did just fine. So it'll come down to the individual. But I will say this: even some of the best coaches use coaches. That's the thing. Sometimes it's just to have a mentor or just a second set of eyes on things. So do you need one? I mean, again, that's a subjective answer. But if just because you may not necessarily need one or think you need one doesn't mean that one couldn't help.
What is the success rate? Like, out of 100 people who sign up for Macros Inc., how many of them get to where they want to go?
Well, if you take away, well, we'd have to first eliminate anybody that doesn't go past the 2 weeks, right? Because some people are just, they do decide it's not for me. So let's take that out of the equation. Let's assume that we're talking about everybody who stays past the 2 weeks and gives it a fair shot. I would have to see, I mean, how do you quantify that though? That's the thing, because are we quantifying success as I've lost a pound versus I lost, where's that threshold? You know, I lost 30 pounds. There are different varying degrees of success. So,
and that's one of the things that a lot of people ask. And my response is, I can think of maybe of all the clients we've had, let's just say this year, maybe a handful of people who didn't see major progress. And maybe that was scale weight, or maybe they completely changed their relationship with food, or maybe they like learned to love themselves again. But I can think of maybe a handful of people who didn't have like a major, some form of transformation. And generally those were people who, from day one were like not fully bought in.
yeah, well, that's the thing. To that point, you also, if you're going to answer that question, you then also have to eliminate people who aren't really giving it the effort, right? Yeah. If you are giving it effort and you are consistent and you are doing it long enough, you basically can't fail, because if you follow your macros, it's an infallible method. It's been proven every time. So the people that are not, that don't go on to see success are typically the people that just didn't try as much as they needed to.
Yeah. What other questions do you have about coaching? What questions do other people have about coaching?
We got to get some, we got to get some questions from the group.
So if you guys have questions, pop them in the group, or not in the group, in the comments. Let us know what questions you have about coaching. I did a Q&A the other day and I got like 500 questions. So I know people have questions. They're a little gun shy. Don't
really?
worry. Yeah.
I mean, I saw you did the live, but I didn't know it was that many questions.
Don't worry, because your comments actually pop up as like anonymous Facebook user. So we probably don't even know who you are asking questions. So don't worry, we won't blast you live on air.
That could be dangerous though for us.
I could.
People could anonymously ask questions.
Yeah, like you generally do that.
I do that, and then but you guys you're usually right about who it is. Like Jay's like, that's got to be a comment from Dylan.
Yeah, generally
speaking. How do you know that? Yeah, give it away. What we should do, yeah, unless if you've got any other ideas, you fire them away first. But you're kind of the diabetes, guy, right? You have a very extensive background in that as it relates to diet and nutrition, and so. I guess I would have a couple questions for you that also people in the group might have, because we do have diabetics in the group. But are you open to some questions about that?
I suppose you could probably goad me into that.
So the question that we get, and I've seen in the group, is, do diabetics need to avoid sugar or carbohydrates?
As a general rule of thumb, not really. Couple different answers to that. If you're type 1 versus type 2, my answer will vary. If you have type 1 and you're on insulin, it's a different discussion. That you still need a modest amount, and you can kind of work depending on what your goals are, and in your situation, you may need lower carbohydrates or you may need higher carbohydrates, right? Like if you're a bodybuilder, you're going to need a higher carbohydrate load. If you're pretty sedentary and you're type 1, we'll probably try to drive the bus with a lowish carbohydrate, moderate carbohydrate diet and lower insulin loads. If you're type 2, you don't need to avoid them. You also shouldn't be consuming huge amounts of either fats or carbohydrates. So really moderate amounts within reason. One of the things that's really interesting is if you actually look at people who have type 2 diabetes and you look at their metabolic rates, and their substrate utilization. So whether they're using fats, carbohydrates, or proteins, people with type 2 diabetes have impaired fat metabolism. At baseline, they're actually burning a higher rate of carbohydrates than fats compared to a normal person, right? So like at rest, Dylan, you're burning more fats compared to somebody who has type 2 diabetes. They're actually utilizing more carbohydrates, which is part of the problem of why these people have insulin resistance, is their fat metabolism is impaired. So high fat diets may actually exacerbate some of the metabolic problems, unless it's in the context of a high fat diet's leading to caloric restriction, then it can work.
So can you tell us the difference between type 1 and type 2?
Yes. Type 1 is a disease of lack of insulin production. And it's essentially a autoimmune disease where you have a genetic predisposition and an environmental trigger that causes the destruction of your beta cells. So you don't produce any insulin.
Is that typically inherited then?
It's inherited in the fact that you inherit your genes from your people, but it's not like, hey, if
You're gonna
you
do
had
it.
type 1, your kid is more likely to have
Yeah,
type 1.
right. Okay.
There is some genetic risk, but it's not like, hey, you have blue eyes, your kids have blue eyes, right? It's not like that at all.
Okay.
So that's a much different disease than type 2, which is insulin resistant, which means your body is resistant to the insulin that is present.
Mhm.
The pathophysiology of the diseases are very different. The treatments are very different. The lifestyle management is very different. They are two very different diseases.
Why would type 2 diabetes, why would this, because my understanding is that in type 2, for example, your cells, they essentially don't open up and accept the glucose in your blood, right? Because they're desensitized, right? So the cells, I mean, why wouldn't they be sensitive to, to glucose or respond to the hormone insulin?
Do you want the simple answer or the very long, complicated answer?
I want the long, complicated answer, but I guess we have to take, time and the viewers into account. We have,
Okay.
So I mean, I'll leave that up to you.
So there's a few things there, and I'll kind of deconstruct into two compartments. One is your peripheral tissue, which is like, let's just say your skeletal muscle, for example, and then the other is your liver and your pancreas. Because it's easier to compartmentalize those. In your peripheral tissue, like your skeletal muscle, imagine insulin is like a key, and you have a insulin receptor on your cells that is like the lock, right? So imagine the key fits into the lock and you go to turn the lock and the lock won't turn, right? That's essentially what's happening in your muscle cells. So on the surface of your cell, you have this receptor, right? And it's like, imagine this is the inside and this is the outside. It crosses the barrier. And when insulin like binds that receptor, it basically causes a cascade of signals, right? Your IRS2 receptor gets phosphorylated. It goes through the PI3-AKT pathway, goes through a whole bunch of other stuff that causes GLUT4 to go up and grab the glucose from outside the cell. That whole signaling process gets disrupted. There's evidence it gets disrupted right at the phosphorylation site. There's evidence it gets disrupted at the like PI3-AKT piece. There's evidence it gets disrupted even downstream from that. The GLUT4 protein may be disrupted. The whole signal just gets all, for lack of a better word, messed up, right? So the actual signaling processes inside your cells that translate the signal from outside to glucose uptake is all jumbled. And so what causes that is inside your cells, a bunch of bad stuff happens that gets that all discombobulated, right? Imagine like if you have like electrical wires in your house running, right? And inside the walls, like your wires get cut, right? That's kind of what happens. So inside your cells, when you have energy overload, so you start to get too much fat accumulation inside like muscle cells, that starts to disrupt all these metabolic things going on that keep these signals running. So you actually just kind of jam up those signals, for lack of a better analogy.
To me, that's super interesting. And that's the lock and key was kind of my, layman's understanding of it as well. Obviously, I don't have the depth of knowledge that you do in the matter, but that's kind of the way I thought made the most sense in terms of how it's explained.
Yeah.
Can excess carbohydrate intake cause that desensitization essentially, or is that more of a matter of chronic, let's say, being chronically over your calorie allowance, right? In kind of a hypercaloric state.
Yeah, that's definitely the cause, right? There's this idea that if you have glucose and you have insulin present a lot, your body gets like used to the insulin and it becomes desensitized. That's not really how it works. If that were the case, people who had, type 1 diabetes and were taking exogenous insulin, or people who had high carbohydrate diets would be more likely to develop type 2 diabetes. And that doesn't really appear to be the case, right? Carbohydrate intake is not a great predictor of the development of type 2 diabetes. What is carrying excess body fat tissue.
Interesting. Okay. So that makes sense, because if type 1, if they're injecting, like you said, exogenous insulin, then in the idea that in diabetes type 2, the idea there that exogenous insulin will burn out your receptors, that's kind of what you're saying, is that's where it doesn't really make much sense, because if that were the case, then their exogenous insulin would stop becoming effective, right?
Yeah. Let me see if I can find a graph that I made at one point.
And while you're doing that, I'm gonna drop a comment here. We need some questions.
Yeah, people. What the heck?
You know why? I bet I know why. Because it's when you go live, it says Jay Woith is now live in Macros.
Nobody wants to listen to Jay.
Nobody cares about Jay. Nobody wants to see him live. That's probably what it's all
right. Let's see if I can find this graph before I share the whole. Okay. So this is actually kind of an interesting. So this is basically the history of disease with diabetes. And what you notice is this blue line right here is your glucose level. And I think I have this somewhere in the NutriWiki. I'll have to find it. But this is your glucose level. This red line is your insulin resistance, right? Mm-hmm. And this yellow line is your insulin production. So what do you notice between normal and essentially, we'll just call it pre-diabetes?
Well, it looks like, I'm trying to read, what's the yellow pointing to? That's kind of where it starts to deviate.
Production. So basically what happens is your insulin resistance starts to go up and your insulin production starts to go up, but your glucose stays normal. So what that means is your cells are starting to become resistant to insulin, right? Your body's trying to keep your glucose levels normal, so it's pumping out more insulin from your pancreas. Mm-hmm. And that's keeping your glucose normal, right? It's like, hey, I'm just going to increase how much I'm pushing out. So even if your cells are kind of like, hey, I don't want any more of this, your body's like, no, damn it, you're going to take it and you're going to like it. Yeah. So you can control your blood glucose, right? But then as your body starts to, like, you reach amount of insulin that you can't produce anymore, really. And so you start to see an increase in glucose level. And then once your disease gets far enough along, due to all the other things that go on, your pancreas starts to have some problems and your beta cells start to die. And so then you can't produce as much insulin. So eventually your insulin production drops and then your glucose starts to really run away. And then this is generally where people are taking pretty massive amounts of medication.
Okay. Here's one follow-up question then for you. Because we talk about in the group people that want to sign up, and I get this question before people sign up as well. It's, hey, I'm type 2 diabetic, or I'm type 1 or whatever. Can your coaches work with me, even though I have this disease or this condition? Which of course the answer is yes. But the question is, because when you lose weight, and the leaner you get, you tend to become more insulin sensitive, right? So, and diabetes becomes a lot more manageable when you lose weight, and sometimes in certain cases it can be completely reversed, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong, right? But
yes, and there's some debate on this. So I generally tend to use the term remission.
Yeah.
Reversal is, I don't like that word, because part of the problem is there's things we know about the disease and there's things we don't know about the disease. Some of the things that we know are the physiology of like what you experience can reverse, right? So like you can go back to normal glucose levels and you can require no medication, right? What we do know is that you are more likely to go back into diabetes, maybe at a lower body fat level than you did before. Like, right, maybe you had to be at 40% body fat for it to really kick off before. and now maybe your threshold is 30, 35%.
You could still put yourself back into that.
Yes, 100%.
Okay.
Part of that we think is just from like trained physiology of your body to like know what's coming. The other thing is, and this is what I did probably the last 2 years of my postdoc I worked on, there are epigenetic changes that occur in a high glucose, high fatty acid, high energy environment. So the actual like marks on your genome that says, hey, I should turn these genes on or don't turn these genes on, actually change when
That's
you are
from
exposed.
that's just being from a consistent energy surplus. Is that kind of what it comes down to?
Well, it kind of depends. It's more of like the diabetes milieu of like high energy overload, high glucose, high
Mhm.
fatty acid, high amino acid, kind of the whole thing. But
Yeah.
these marks, some of them are irreversible. So once they're there, they're there. So your phenotype really, even though it may not show it on labs, is different than it was before. So this is what a project I was working on. We called it metabolic memory. So your body remembers what it was like before.
So you can essentially, through diet and sedentary lifestyle, change your genes, you're saying?
The expression of them, absolutely.
Right.
What's
Right.
really interesting is how quick your body will change in certain circumstances. So, like, if you think about this, was a really interesting paper that was done when they were looking at, like, hey, can we do high fat diets in sports, right? Um, if you think about your metabolism, you have kind of your phosphocreatine system, right? And then you
Mhm.
have glycolysis, and then you have oxidative phosphorylation or aerobic metabolism.
Yep.
The kind of bottleneck that pushes carbohydrates from glycolysis, the end product, into the oxidative pathway is a enzyme called pyruvate dehydrogenase.
Mhm.
And they did a study in cyclists where they said, I think it was less than a week. I want to say it was like 3 or 5 days of eating a very high fat diet. You actually started producing less of this pyruvate dehydrogenase. So you compromise your body's ability to fully oxidize carbohydrates within a few days of eating a super high fat diet. So your body will change its gene expression pretty quickly based on what you're doing to it, which
Yeah.
is great, because if you think, hey, I'm going to start changing my nutrition habits, even before you start seeing scale weight, you're changing the gene expression in your metabolism.
Well, if you're increasing fats, then in that particular study, obviously, then carbohydrates are down.
Yeah.
And the reduction of um, pyruvate dehydrogenase is, it makes sense, because isn't that typically one of the, I mean, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's like the first step in the Krebs cycle, isn't it? Isn't that what, like, the first, that's what goes into the cycle?
Yeah, so it's kind of the link, one of the
Right.
enzymatic links between glycolysis and aerobic metabolism.
So, and are you saying that that's because that happens because of the reduction in carbohydrates, or simply because of the increase in fats?
I think it's a little bit of both.
Okay.
I'd have to go back to the literature, but I think it's more of the increasing the fat intake than decreasing the carbohydrate intake. But I could be
Gotcha.
wrong on that specific detail.
Interesting.
We do
Well,
have
I'm
a
learning more.
question.
Yeah, fire away.
Generally speaking, how many sets of a single exercise per session is optimal for strength adaptations? I.e., bench press or squat when at energy maintenance or a surplus. Assume they train. I mean, if it's for optimal strength, I think you're going to be looking more at the intensity of your training than, yeah, than the sets of a single exercise. So, like, if you're squatting, you could be doing sets of 50, or you could be doing sets of doubles. And then that will change dramatically. So generally, like, if you're really just trying to maximize strength, doing singles, doubles, triples for 3 sets, 5 sets, 10 sets is generally better than that. So it comes down to more to intensity than to how many sets.
Yeah, no, that's very well. And there's a lot of literature on that too. But I was also reading something the other day that basically said, I could pull it up. I don't know. I'd have to dig for it, but I have it somewhere. It's basically like um, that the overall, like, weight on the bar. And actually, this is, I'm kind of getting into, it does tie into strength somewhat, but for, let's say, muscle size or hypertrophy, right? That the overall um, weight on the bar isn't as important as kind of going towards that last 1 to 2 if you say I got 1 to 2 reps in the tank, if you're going to near failure, that kind of the results are generally the same regardless of the number of reps in each set, because at 1 to 2 reps in reserve, it's kind of like the load is the same, right? Because if you're going that far, like you're still producing that same, I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, but like they all kind of equal out, because if you're going towards that failure or near failure, that's where motor recruitment is high and requires more adaptation. Does that make sense?
Yeah, there's also a component of total load lifted too, right?
Yeah.
So like if you were to do like 5 sets of max singles, that's great for strength and motor recruitment and neurological adaptation, but that doesn't give you a whole lot of
it's not going to produce much hypertrophy.
Yeah, so if it's for mass, it's more volume based too.
Cool.
Allison says, Hannah says, oh, hey. Hannah.
I was hoping for a question.
I was hoping she had some sort of pickle jokes, but she does not.
Or questions about pickles. I don't really know.
Yeah, we're down to 10 listeners, which is very sad.
Oh, come on now.
We did have at least one person sign up while we were online, though. So there's that. That's great.
Well,
what can we do to get people to comment? We could get really desperate here.
Well, we got to be careful. But what do you have in mind?
I don't know. What can I give away?
Giving away stuff does seem to people seem to like that.
It could also be that like it's Monday of Christmas week, and I think like nobody's actually working. I think you and I may be the only people actually working, plus all of our coaches and stuff. But
my wife was giving me a hard time last night at like 7. Actually, I think you and I were emailing back and forth at that time. We were talking on something. She goes, "Why are you working at 7 p.m.?" I'm like, and I didn't. I just kind of brushed it off. But like, I mean, you're right. I mean, are we the odd ones out here? Because I feel like anybody else on a Sunday night in December would just be lounging around on the couch. But
yeah, well, I think also the hard part of it is like a lot of our work is, I don't want this to say bad, but like it doesn't feel like work sometimes.
Exactly. You nailed it.
It's like if you're sitting on the couch, if you're sitting on the couch, like not like just watching a movie and not really doing anything productive, like just pulling out your phone and like checking a message is not. It's like that's not really work to me. It's like, oh, I'm just like making sure stuff's taken care of.
Well, and even this, like if you and I, let's say we wanted to take a break and go sit down on the couch and just browse on our phone, right? I'd probably be on Facebook. Like even if I want to get on Facebook and like engage with other people, you can't not come across stuff in Macros Inc. So I end up working anyway. Like I end up answering people's questions, right? So you're right. It doesn't feel like work. It's just it's just what you do anyway. At least that's what I do. You know. How do you feel about my picture of these tamales that I had the other day? Did you see that?
Dude, I'm so hungry. I haven't had lunch yet. I think I had a bowl of oatmeal at like 5:30, and then I had like 1 hard-boiled egg at like 10, so I'm starving.
That would be like my daughter's snack at 7:30 in the morning. That kid, she eats so much, it's ridiculous, and she burns it all up, but she does not stop moving, man. She's crazy. What are you gonna have for lunch?
I have some roasted chicken left over, and then I have a very nice loaf of sourdough bread that I bought. I'm probably gonna have some of that too.
Yum. Are you home alone today?
My wife is upstairs asleep because she worked last night at the hospital.
Yeah, I can understand that.
Somebody said, "Don't take it personal. It's not about you. It's always about me."
What is that in reference to?
I think when we were saying nobody loves us and nobody's commenting on us.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say we must have said something that.
We do have a question. How long in general does it take for tennis elbow to heal? It has been a couple months now and it's irritating me. Somebody else asked me this question in my Q&A last night, and my response was, we have a world-class physical therapist who's like probably the smartest physical therapist I know, who does a podcast with us every other week. So I'm actually have this question on the agenda for our next one. And it may be this Wednesday or it may be next Wednesday. I can't remember, but I have to look at my calendar. But yes, I will be answering this question in depth.
Is that Stare.
Yes, Dr. Michael Stare.
He's pretty cool. You should listen to him.
He is pretty awesome.
Do you know the answer to that question though?
I don't. That's why I'm saying
Yeah,
it's beyond my
for sure.
my abilities to answer. What's funny is
well.
Jay and I met Mike in Toronto, not this July, but the previous July. And the story of us staying there in Toronto is absolutely hilarious. I'll have to tell it to you offline.
Did you like Toronto? And what were you guys there for?
We got invited to like a big charity event, like a big entrepreneur charity event. So
cool.
Jay and I flew out there.
Was it a good time?
Yeah, it was a blast. We had a ton of fun.
Yeah, I've never been to Toronto, but I have heard good things.
Ooh, more questions. Great response. Also reminds me of another one. From what I've heard, seen, total volume, regardless of weight load on the bar, seems to facilitate similar hypertrophy. Usually, and I might be wrong, it's in individuals new to weight training. Do you think you would see different results with intermediate and advanced athletes? If I had to draw a curve, I would say your total volume still holds true, even in advanced lifters. The hard part becomes, in order to get sufficient volume, you have to be training harder, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like let's say when you're new, 100,000 pounds in a workout is like your progressive overload. By the time you've been training for 25 years, you're probably like 1,000,000 pounds in a session. Now, to lift 1,000,000 pounds, like doing very concentrated like sets to get to 1,000,000 pounds or whatever I said, like you'd be there all day.
Yeah.
So you have to increase the intensity to get the same stimulus. Plus, there's also this factor of, to handle more volume, you have to be stronger, right? So you have to do strength training to increase your like max strength so you can accumulate more volume. So generally, those people are doing strength training and volume training and strength training and volume training. Plus, there's also like massive amounts of steroids and all sorts of stuff. So, did you see Mr. Olympia this weekend?
No.
Oh my God.
Really?
Dude, it is so crazy. Like the amount of, regardless of drugs and stuff like that, that's in that sport, the amount of work these guys have to do. Sure. And then like, if you see they're like before they were bodybuilders and since they become bodybuilders, it is just mind blowing how much, like if you were to look at their body and be like, how much work did you have to do to look like that? It is unbelievable. Yeah. Like the amount of dedication is.
And it's not just that, it's nutrition as well, right? Like they literally all day, every day just for that.
Yeah. And I don't know if you've ever tried to like put on weight. I can't do it. I can't eat that much. It's like I have like 3 full meals and a snack, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm dying. And these people are like, 10,000 calories a day, and I'm like, it's crazy.
Yeah.
They are.
I found that real quick to touch on that guy's point. I found what I was trying to refer to earlier, so I'll read this quick. When training with multiple sets to failure, we achieve the same hypertrophy regardless of the weight on the bar. This is because the last 5 reps of a set trigger growth. These stimulating reps are where recruitment is high, all fibers are working, and bar speeds are low, tension is high. In fact, when effort is high, bar speeds are identical at the same reps in reserve, regardless of the weight. So the tension dosage is identical. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think that's the prevailing theory. I don't know if that's completely correct or not.
I've actually posted this in other forums to get feedback on it. The general consensus is, as an overarching idea, like you said, that's kind of, yes, it's a decent rule to follow, but of course there are always extenuating. It's a very, it can be a complex thing, right? There's a lot of literature on different methodologies, and so you could have a real in-depth conversation about that, but that's kind of the prevailing theory, like you said.
Yeah, I think the other point to make too is, like, let's say we do all this research and we find volume is the biggest predictor of muscle growth, and we postulate all these mechanisms, and all our postulations are wrong. Like, it has nothing to do with the last 5 reps and motor recruitment patterns and all tension and all stuff, and like none of that's true. Does that really matter? Because we found, like, here's the one variable to peg to follow to get the results you want. In reality, it doesn't really matter what the mechanism is. It's like, I don't care. That's why, like, It's kind of like when you think about the stock market, right? Like everybody says, like, hey, I know how the stock market works. Nobody knows how the stock market works. Some days it goes up, some days it goes down. But as long as you make money, I don't really care how it works.
Some people are not seeing the forest for the trees, right? I mean, that's kind of what, like, you focus on the minutia,
Yeah.
and you neglect the overall picture. When if you just focused on the overall picture, you'd probably make more progress.
Yeah.
So, you got any more questions in there?
We do. I mid yawn. Dylan, I'm gonna let you answer this question.
All right.
What are your thoughts on reverse dieting or bringing calories back up when you stall in weight loss? Diet breaks, essentially? ? What's the optimal time for a break?
That's a pretty. That also is I mean, I always want to say it depends, right? Because it's just such a subjective thing.
So I guess let's break it down. What are your thoughts on reverse dieting / bringing calories up when you stall?
From a standpoint of physics and the physics of weight loss, that would actually be the opposite of what you want to do. Now, I'm just speaking in terms of physics, right? And how the body works and how you actually lose weight. So, how you lose fat, I should say. So, bringing calories up is, like I said, that's the opposite of what you would actually have to do. That being said, what do I think of it? It stems from, people get this idea that if you increase calories, that's how you break a weight loss plateau. In actuality, what happens is, when you're in a calorie deficit, you could probably attest to this in your research, Brad, but you have certain hormones that increase that can cause water retention, because you're in a stress. Your body is under stress when you're deficient in calories, and that can kind of lead to some water retention, and it can look like a stall on the scale. So then, when you increase calories, some of those hormones decrease. It allows some water to be released, and you see a drop on the scale. So people think, oh, I increased my calories, and now look, I broke through my plateau. When actually that's usually just water weight. So if the idea is that you want to reverse diet because you think you're in a plateau, I would sort of challenge you to think differently about that. The real way to break through a plateau is to tighten up on your tracking, and let's see if there are errors anywhere that you can clean up. Is there something wrong in the math? Are you not being consistent? But that's a whole lot different conversation than taking a diet break for your mental sake, because
well, I guess let me play devil's advocate. Why might increasing your calories 300 calories a day lead to more weight loss? Because that we do see that happen, right? So how do we think that might actually work?
Well, you tend to see better adherence with a higher, or with a more conservative deficit. If I put someone on 1,200 calories a day who could just as easily lose weight at 1,700 calories a day, eating 1,700 calories a day is going to feel a lot better than having to adhere to 1,200. And it's not as sustainable as a 1,700 diet. So you typically see your adherence improve.
Yeah, so there's an adherence piece, and then the other piece that I always tell people is, like, what about your non-exercise activity, right? Like if you're at 1,200 calories a day or 1,700 calories a day, the amount of energy you have to just move around is a lot different, right? I think adherence / accurate reporting and your physical activity, maybe training in the gym, all those things, is why when we actually look at studies of like very low calorie diets and we look at like 1,200 calories a day, 900 calories a day, or 600 calories a day, in the scientific literature, weight loss is pretty similar amongst all three of those diets, right? You would think 600 versus 1,200, you would see, gosh, 5-6 pound a month difference between those people, but you don't. It's maybe a pound. It's not really that their metabolisms are shutting down. It's like, hey, your adherence at 600 calories a day probably sucks, and your physical activity at 600 calories a day probably really sucks.
Yeah, well, what you're ultimately referring to is metabolic adaptation, right? Because and I see this with clients that I've put at maintenance after, like, they're like, oh my God, am I going to gain weight? What's funny is the initial maintenance calories that I set for them, actually, after a few weeks go by, we find that I can increase another 100 or 200 and you don't gain anything at all because your NEAT has gone up. Your overall activity.
That's so neat.
What's that?
That's so neat.
You would say something like that.
Oh, geez.
That was a really good question, though.
Yeah. So diet breaks. We know that diet breaks can be successful, whether from a psychological perspective, a adherence perspective, any of those sorts of things. If you are interested, you can look up the Matador study where they basically did like intermittent diet breaks, like not intermittent fasting, but they'd like diet for 2 weeks, have 2 weeks off, diet for 2 weeks, have 2 weeks off. And it was as effective, if not more effective, than a continual weight loss diet. And I think it has to do with adherence. And the kind of neat adaptation piece. And I have a talk where I have this graph. If I can find it, I'll pull it up.
Yeah, and to add to that too, with basically that's your sort of, that's an undulating diet, right? Like if you're increasing and decreasing, but as long as the overall, from a larger picture, as long as it all equals out to be the same, you'll be successful with that too. It's about your chronic intake, not whether you eat X amount on one day and different on the other day.
Did you just reference drug habits on air?
No, I don't think so.
I think you said your chronic intake.
You're just full of good ones today, man. That's awesome.
This is what happens when I get hungry. I get very strange. All right, I have this graph in here somewhere. Oh, no, I don't have it.
You don't have it? Well, then I'm going to tell you right now while you're searching for that. I finally watched the movie that you suggested, the very first one that you ever suggested to me, Crazy Stupid Love. I watched it.
Yeah.
And when you first mentioned it, I thought this has got to be a chick flick, right? Because what kind of movie is called Crazy
It's so funny.
I thought it was pretty good. I had a totally different picture. I had a totally different movie in my head. Like I thought it was going to be like just like off the wall, like he tries to get Steve Carell to become a ladies' man, and that everything was just going to go awry. It didn't necessarily go like that, but it was still good. That's the picture I had in my head.
It's a great movie, though.
Yeah, no, it was good. Thank you. I actually I busted out laughing on my couch when you realize that the girl that he's dating is Steve Carell's daughter. I was like, no way. I'm sorry for anybody that hadn't seen that movie. I just spoiled it for you, but I was like, you gotta be kidding me. I did not see it coming. That was pretty good. So thank you. I'll take
my favorite. I have two scenes in that movie that are my favorite. One is when he shows up to go shopping and he's like, "Are you Steve Jobs? Are you in a fraternity? Why are you wearing New Balance?" And then the other one is when she like comes over to his house for a drink and he takes his shirt off and she's like, "You're photoshopped."
It's like your Photoshop. Yeah. What would you do if this April or May, whenever it is, when we're in Vegas, let's say we're with Jay and Jay looks at your footwear, tells you to take them off, and then throws them off the balcony and says, "We're going to go buy you new shoes."
I would be like, if you're paying for them, I'm fine.
So you'd walk around Vegas barefoot until we found you a new pair of shoes?
Well, I'd have socks on, but.
Well, what if you were wearing sandals?
I don't wear sandals out in public. Unless I'm going to the beach, I don't wear sandals.
All right, that's fair. So
mostly because my toes are so jacked up from the years of running into walls playing basketball.
What kind of shoes do you have? Do you have Nikes? You seem like you don't.
You don't have
New Balance, do you?
For what?
No, just like general footwear.
I have. I'm
a Nike guy myself.
You're a Nike guy?
Yeah.
I have a pair of Asics running shoes. I have a pair of Skechers that look like Vans. I have a pair of Chuck Taylors.
Nice.
And then I have my basketball shoes. They're all Nike. They used to be. Was it Reebok? No, I think it was Nike.
Fila?
I think I've worn Nike basketball shoes since freshman year of high school.
That's a good amount of time. Did you ever get into do you remember the soaps phase where everybody wore soaps and you could
I never got those.
I didn't either, but I remember that phase. And you remember Airwalks? Did you get Airwalks?
I think I maybe had a pair.
Okay.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, I have a 1:00 meeting. I got to jump on with one of our employees. So
you're late by 1 minute. So
I know.
You can blame it on me.
I will. I'm gonna jump on the call and I'm gonna yell it. I'm gonna
Let's
yell
figure out a way
done.
to do it, and we'll advertise it, and we'll get questions prepared ahead of time as well. So we'll have to do one of these again soon.
All right, sounds good, buddy.
Later.